first got interested in Android and malware in 2008, and I had a phone called HTG1. It was the first Android device ever to come out. And because I'm a geek and all my friends are geeks, they sent me a text, and it turned my phone into a paperweight for about 2 weeks until I figured out what was going on. So what I'm going to talk about revolves around Google Play and Android apps. So about a year ago, I started looking at Android apps, and I had a keyboard on my Android phone, and I was quite bored of it. It was quite slow, wasn't predicting the words I wanted to predict, and I fancied a change. So I went through the Google Play Store, started scrolling through it, and found an app called Flash Keyboard. Has anyone heard of Flash Keyboard? Maybe got it installed? No? If you have, turn your phone off now and come talk to me in about 20 minutes' time. So Flash Keyboard is an app that allows you to change the way that user experience works, improve your experience as an Android user, make it a bit more predictable, use better words, and overall enhance the experience of using an Android device. The app itself is made by a Chinese company called .c. I mention that because it becomes relevant a little bit later on. But when you go through and you want to download an app from the Play Store, it gives you a description. One of the things that I noticed that stood out in the description, it says, Flash Keyboard values your privacy. We do not collect any of your personal data without your explicit permission. I thought that's a really weird thing to put on the description of the application. I want to know what it does, not what it's not doing. The other really weird thing that it did, it says, rest assured you can use Flash Keyboard safely, and it's got a little smiley emoji face. And I can't tell whether they were being ironic or sarcastic, but it made me definitely want to look at this application. And to kind of show you how popular Flash Keyboard is, I've never heard of it before this, started doing the research, but if I go through, Facebook Messenger was in the charts as the most downloaded application, Snapchat the second, Instagram the seventh. Kind of names that you would recognize, well respected. Most of you probably got one or more of those apps installed. And then the 11th most downloaded app was Flash Keyboard. Flash Keyboard had somewhere between 50 and 100 million downloads, so it's not, it's not a small independent one guy sitting making this app. This is quite a big successful application. And for me, if someone's 11th in the Play Store, it's probably been vetted, it's probably fine, but you've got the idea that it's trusted and it's got a bit of respect. And to kind of show you how that kind of works in terms of value, 13th downloaded application was Netflix, probably names you recognize, Spotify, and the terrorist choice WhatsApp there that got hammed this week. So it kind of gives you an idea of how many times this app has been downloaded and how trusted it could be. And to kind of give you an idea, if you've not used Android, what Flash Keyboard looks like, the idea is that you customize the keyboard. You can start off by making any picture you want. So you could have flowers. You could have maybe a picture of the England flag if you're feeling patriotic. Or because this is a talk about the internet, a black cat, because everyone on the internet loves cats. So the idea is that you can change it, make it what you want. It's completely customizable to how you want to use it. I want to rewind a little bit and talk about Android permissions. So on an iPhone recently, you've had this idea that when you install an application and it wants access to your location, you kind of approve or deny it. Up until about a year ago, 18 months ago, on an Android, that wasn't the case. So when you install an application, you get a list of permissions that it wants to gain access to, whether it's your location, SMS, whatever. And you either click accept or deny. And if you deny it, you don't install the application, and that's fine. If you then go and accept, you accept all of those permissions. This has changed, say, about a year ago, but this still affects 1.2 billion devices that are running in the world where you don't have the option to click accept or deny. You just accept all, and the application gets installed. So the first thing I did is I thought, right, I'm going to look at the permissions that the Android application takes, and I'm going to go compare it maybe against Google Keyboard. So Google Keyboard on the left, 15 permissions. It's a keyboard. It probably needs some information. It probably wants to read my text. It wants to look at what I'm doing, to get an idea of how to predict the words I'm using. Flash Keyboard does exactly the same job, wants to predict who I am, maybe change the picture. 15 permissions, 49. So 3 times as many permissions to do exactly the same job. Working in security, that got me triggered straight away. I want to look at what this application is doing. I want to find out why does it need 49 permissions. So I'm going to go through, and I'm not going to go through all 49 permissions because it's boring and we haven't got enough time. But what I'm going to do is talk about the interesting permissions, the ones that makes me think about what's going on with this application. So it wants to read my messages. That's fine. It maybe wants to learn some words that I'm using, put them into a dictionary and help me predict the words for future when I'm sending text messages. It wants my location, which I thought was really weird. So it wants not only my network location, but my GPS location. And depending on the chipset that's on the actual device, that's somewhere between 1 and 3 meters of accuracy for a keyboard that I want to type and predict words with. Really, really bizarre permission to have. It wants to be able to change my lock screen. So on an Android device, you've got a lock screen, and you may have a picture or a password or a PIN. And it wants to control that in some way. And again, it's a keyboard. I couldn't figure out why it wanted to change the lock screen, but I thought it was a really interesting permission to look at. It wants to download files without notification. So when you have an Android device, if you want to download a file, you get a little arrow in the top left-hand corner, and it gets downloaded in the background. And the application shows you that it's downloading a background file. It might be an update, or it might be an external file like a thesaurus or a dictionary or some kind of add-on to the application. This application wanted to remove that restriction so that it could download files arbitrarily in the background. Wanted to access my Bluetooth settings, which I thought was really weird. It's a keyboard app for my phone. It's not in any way connected to my device in the sense that I haven't got a 3D physical Bluetooth keyboard. I couldn't figure out why it wanted to access my Bluetooth device. And lastly, it wanted to be able to modify any system setting. So any single setting on the device, whether that's where my files are saved, what my camera looks like, anything at all on the device, any system setting, whether I've got a network connection on there, whether I'm connected to Wi-Fi, mobile, wanted to add the ability to modify that. And again, contextually going back, this is a keyboard. I'm not sure why it needed access to these permissions. So as a security tester, the first thing I did is I'm going to look at the way that this application interacts with the outside world to try and get an understanding of what it's doing. So ordinarily, you get your phone, and it connects to the internet directly. You can't really see what information is being sent backwards and forwards between your device and the internet. One of the beauties of proxies, we can move the cloud out the way, stick a proxy in the middle, and what that allows us to do is to send all the requests from the device, send them directly to my computer, not only look at them, but modify them and understand what's going on before they're being sent across the network. So that's the first thing I kind of did. And it looked like this. It looked like the higgity-piggity mess of data, binary data that Graham talked about earlier. And I tried a few different things. I tried different formats to try and understand what was going on. And I couldn't make a sense of what was going on. One of the things I did notice is sending information to a website called Talking Data. That's not associated with the developers .c, but it is also a Chinese company, and it's a Chinese analytics company. So whatever data is being transmitted, it's going to China, to a third-party company. So one of the beautiful things about Android, why I like working with it, is that you can reverse engineer the application. So if you download an application, you want to understand what it's doing, you want to look at the source, understand why it's doing what it's doing, it's pretty trivial to work out exactly what it's doing. So I went ahead and did that, and I found this interesting subroutine. And I'm not expecting any of you to understand what necessarily it's doing. But what I noticed is it's using a function called gzip stream. So I know that the weird data, the binary mess that's being sent earlier, it's being sent through gzip. And I mentioned these Chinese analytics companies, and it's got a hard-coded IP address, and it's got a hard-coded URL. So whatever data is being sent, it's hard-coded in the application. It means for me that it must have one hell of an infrastructure behind it. If 50 million people can download this application, and it can send data to it, and it made me want to look at what data was being sent. So I went through, I looked at the binary mess that I saw earlier, and I started carving out what was being sent to this third-party analytics company. So it was sending the name of my device, so if Samsung S7, for example, sending that across in this weird binary mess that I saw earlier to this Chinese analytics company. It was sending my IMEI, which I looked at this, and legally it's maybe not personal identifiable information, but it certainly identifies that device and where that device sits. And it unnecessarily doesn't tie me to the device. What does is maybe my email address. So most people have their first name surname at your organization you're working for. That's pretty personally identifiable. Immediately you can tell what the IMEI device, but then also who owns it. And then because of the GPS permission it asked for earlier, it was taking your GPS coordinates and sending that across to this third-party analytics company as well. It's also taken, for me, maybe something benign like my mobile network, but again, contextually, this is a keyboard application. I've never once said, yeah, fine, send all my personal information across the internet. I don't care, I just want to use your app. And it also sent information about configured VPN. So I started talking with some friends, and actually, if this was a nation state, they now have my email address, where I am in the world, to my GPS coordinates. If it's a corporate device, they've got access to my corporate VPN. So it makes it really easy to target one individual or maybe someone in an area, as you know people's locations. One thing I did notice is that the data itself was being transmitted completely unencrypted. So if you were sat in Starbucks and you was using this app, and someone else was sat in Starbucks connected to the same access point, it would be trivial for them to look and actually see this information being sent over the clear text, over the internet, and for someone else to, again, reverse engineer and look at the information being transmitted across. So I found out that this week Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary, thinks that encryption's a bad idea. So maybe she'd approve of this app, all the information that's being transmitted over the internet, completely unencrypted. One other thing I did notice that the application was doing, the information it was transmitting also included Wi-Fi information. So it knows where I am, who I am, but it also knows what Wi-Fi hotspots I'm connected to. But it also transmits and actively starts scanning. So it says, OK, I know, Andy, you're connected to this Wi-Fi hotspot, but I want to know what hotspots are nearby. So it takes the information about the access points nearby, and we'll take that information and send that across as well. For one thing I mentioned earlier, that the application wants to control access to the screen lock. This is a standard Android screen lock, so it shows the date and time. It shows details of any files I've downloaded, and it also shows the charging status of the device. So if you've used Android before, you probably recognize this as a standard Android lock screen. And one of the brilliant things that Flash Keyboard did, it improved my lock screen for me, which was great. And when I say improved, it definitely didn't improve the lock screen. What it did was sit and put adverts on the device. So again, to contextualize it, this is an application, 50 million downloads, 49 permissions that I just wanted to use to type to my friends, to make my experience a little bit easier, a little bit better, and it's put adverts on the lock screen. So I got talking to some developer friends, and I was like, why do developers do this? And they're saying, well, it's a free application, it's cost them time to invest and make this application. Maybe there's some kind of financial gain in them, making this the adverts on the lock screen. I said, well, how much money do you actually make from these lock screen adverts? So the average user unlocks their device 85 times a day. 50 million users of Flash Keyboard, and they get paid 10 cents a time. So for every time someone unlocks their device and sees this advert, they get paid 10 cents. $425 million a day, Flash Keyboard are getting paid in order for you to unlock your device. And that's on the conservative estimate if we say that there's only 50 million people downloaded this device, this application. We know it's somewhere between 50 and 100 million, but even on the conservative side, that's them making a lot of money. So to kind of recap on what we know so far, we know that our Flash Keyboard's been installed by 50 million users. That was shown on the Google Keyboard when on the Google Play Store. When you download the app, it tells you how many times it's been installed. We know it takes our data, as I showed earlier, and sends it completely unencrypted to a Chinese third-party analytics company. And we know that the application installs malware on our device by putting adverts on it. So is this malware? It's an app that's unreputable on the Play Store. And I got talking to my colleagues, and we tried to define malware, and we went to that source of knowledge, Wikipedia, who defined malware, software which used to disrupt computer systems. Probably not. Gather sensitive information. I think pretty sure we can say, yeah, it's getting my email address, the IMEI, my location, my Wi-Fi. It's taking that information. Access to private computer systems is probably not accessing. I've given it permission to do that. But what it's doing is putting unwanted advertising that was never mentioned when I downloaded the application and put on my device. So it says, so two of the four things, I would probably say, we can say this is malware, fair enough. So this is on a work device, a test device that's not connected to the internet. Fine. First thing you do, get malware, just uninstall. No. Sorry, I can't uninstall the malware. And I've never had this. With an Android app, you just click uninstall, you drag it to the top. It says, are you sure you want to install? Yeah, fine. Click OK. App completely uninstalls. The reason why the application does this, it actually abuses what's called a trust. So the application escalates itself into admin mode and makes it really difficult to uninstall. Admin mode on Android has a legitimate purpose. So if you're a corporate user, you've got a corporate device, and the organization says, actually, I want you to have a password that's 6 characters long, I want you to log in with your fingerprint, or I want to be able to remotely wipe the device, they have to have admin access so that you don't click on install and then set whatever you want on the device. So there is a legitimate purpose for this. But when I installed the application again, I never knew that it was asking for this admin permission. Even when I went through the 49 permissions, at no point was it clear that actually it can take over your device and install. And this is how I did it. So when I mentioned earlier that it wanted to change the lock screen, one of the things to change the lock screen, it needed admin access, and that's how it got around this, this permission. Because I work for Pentest, and we're an ethical company, first thing I do is contact the developer. So this was about a year ago. Sent the developer saying, I appreciate, like all developers, you may have copied some code off Stack Overflow. Maybe had some negative effects. Can you explain what your application's doing? Have you just copied this without realizing what's going on? And actually, or have you actually, what's going on with your code? And they didn't get back to me. I emailed them 3 different times, using different email addresses I found from their website, from the Play Store, and then there was one hard-coded in the application. So I went to Google and said, Google, do you realize what this application's doing? I know that you like to harvest data, but actually, as a user, I've installed this application with 49 permissions, and I didn't know it was going to do this. Google didn't back to me, but they did remove the application from the Play Store without notifying me. So I thought, OK, I've done all this research, and I now need to publish it. So I went out and I spoke to the BBC, I spoke to the Register, and this gathered a lot of press attention, and it was the most read article on the Register for a couple of days. And then this really weird thing happened. The app came back on the Play Store, and I couldn't understand it. So it came back in 2 forms. The first form, it just renamed itself. It called it Flash Keyboard Lite. It was exactly the same application, all 49 permissions. I downloaded it, looked at the code side by side, and every line of the code was exactly the same. But the problem is if you're offering malware, it's completely done on reputation. So you've lost this 50 million downloads. You lost your 11th place in the chart. So then what they did is they removed the code, which took all your data, but left these 49 permissions in situ, so that actually it went back on the 11th on the Play Store, but it'd be pretty trivial for them to put that code back in, especially when they've got this download without notification in the background. They can just put the code up to a third-party server, it will download the code and put it back in. Luckily, they haven't done that, as I've witnessed yet. So some kind of takeaway lessons from my talk. Just because something's popular, Justin Bieber, doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea. Just because an app's on the Google Play Store doesn't necessarily mean it can be trusted. So around last year, I think it was last August, everyone on an iPhone was running around parks, taking down imaginary Pokemon. This wasn't available on the Android store yet. So what Malfoy office did said, yeah, we're going to make this app. It's called Pokemon Go. Just download it. Everything's absolutely fine. And this appeared on the Play Store for a few hours until Google realized what was going on. So think about the permissions when you're downloading applications. Think about contextually. So there may be an app that needs 49 permissions, but it's probably not a keyboard app, which makes the chasing the malware a little bit difficult. And think before you click the link. So even the best of us, security professionals, can install apps which want access to our Twitter accounts and get compromised. One other thing I learned is when I published this white paper, I sent it onto the BBC. I put it on our website. It went to the Register, and I researched everything that I did, all the steps that I'd taken, the device that I'd used, the version of the software, and exactly how I'd gone through. I published this and sent it to them and said, look, I want you to review this. And they sent us a cease and desist letter. This is the authors of the .c, the Chinese malware, said, actually, we really don't want you talking about this. You're bad-mouthing our company, and we really don't like it. They couldn't actually dispute anything I said in the white paper because it was so well-researched. They just didn't like the fact that when they typed Flash Keyboard into Google, the first 10 pages was, this app is malware, it's sending all your data to China. The reason why they did this is I later found out that they'd got $45 million of seed funding from a Chinese bank. So obviously the Chinese bank's given them the money and then actually gone through Google and said, actually, we don't like that that this company, this random company in the UK, based out of Manchester, Pentest, are bad-mouthing our company. We'd like to shut them up, please. Send them a letter and tell them not to do this. Thank you very much.